Uh,
Hello. Am I audible?
yes, sir. It's audible.
And the frame is okay? Is the
Pardon?
frame okay?
Hello.
Overall frame is okay?
Yes, sir. Yes.
I get echo of your voice.
I'm just checking it. Now it's perfect. Hello.
I think so. Now there is no echo. Yeah.
Yes.
Fine.
In fact, we had always one is the host and one is myself.
Okay.
So I was just checking it out.
Rest of the participants are mute.
Yes. Anybody who wants to ask a question, they will post it on the chat box, or if they want, they should be unmuted. We will unmute them. That's not the issue. Otherwise, once we have all the speakers on, then there's a lot of echo, etc. And some people are on mobile, their bandwidth is quite low.
Right. No problem.
So it's 5. We can start off. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Beyond Law CLC and UILS Punjab University Chandigarh, we have yet another session which, according to us, would give us an insights on a different perspective. As we all thought that if speech is silver, silence is gold. So whether we can have a right of silence equivalent to gold is an issue which will be unfolded by none other by Mr. Aseem Pandya, who is a senior advocate, primarily doing his practice in Gujarat High Court. And this lockdown period also shows us that the boundaries of the states created within Pan India is more geographical, or once we see the maps. But once the knowledge is to be shared, then the platform is seamless, and we can exchange our thoughts irrespective of the state, place where we are sitting. This lockdown has also showed us new vistas of a thought process. Amongst us, we have Mr. Aseem Pandya, who has been twice the president of the Gujarat Bar Association, which we all know that Gujarat Bar Association is one of the most vibrant bar associations in India. And the issues which, as normally one feels, we all talk of rights and duties. But to narrow down the entire canvas of an issue to right to silence itself speaks that the speaker has insights. That is why he played a pivotal role for the Bar Council rules, a person writing 5 books on different perspectives. Itself shows that it is the knowledge which speaks. They say why the topic becomes right to silence is that, as they say, that the more the knowledge, more is the silence. They say that the right to silence is an interesting facet. One of my friends, Sujoy Kantawala, who knows you very well, since we had also muted him, he was showing me expressions to the effect that I am silent.
Yeah.
I just wanted to convey one aspect, that once it is right to silence, we also wanted to test it in the other way. Could the host on the other side of the platform could silence me, and what is the effect of silence? And I am quite happy that silencing in its own way gave a different facet, because on the chat box we were receiving that I am not audible. But so it shows that as a lawyer we always feel, and we are always enamored by the fact that if we keep on speaking, that will probably hammer the point more perspectively. So right to silence has different facets. The topic which Mr. Pandya takes is on a different level, and what we think that silence has its different connotation is a different thing. So welcome you on the board.
Thank
We
you.
can start the session from yours. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening to everyone who is present in this webinar. I congratulate Mr. Vikas, Beyond Law CLC, Punjab Law University, and all his team members for organizing these kind of webinars for the persons all concerned who is interested in doing the law. So it is indeed a great job. It requires great dedication, and which he is showing that dedication in holding this kind of webinars. I am thankful to him for inviting me to share my views on this subject, right to silence. So I am thankful to Mr. Vikas and Beyond Law CLC and Punjab Law University for giving me this opportunity. Now, when we talk about this, I am not going into much into the formalities because it takes time and we have less time. So not sticking to the formalities, I am directly addressing you on the subject which we have chosen today. Right to silence. This description is, in my view, is little inept in our constitution. Our constitution recognizes right against self-incrimination. That is recognized under Article 20, Clause 3, which I will take you to that article little later. So first of all, one thing which I would like to clarify is there is no complete right to silence. Nobody is entitled to keep his mouth shut completely. That is not envisaged in our constitution. There are many other constitutions, there are many other nations where there is a right of complete silence. But I will speak and elaborate this aspect little later. Now, first thing which I would like to point out is that this right to silence or right against testimonial compulsion or self-incrimination is fundamental to any criminal jurisprudence of almost all nations. I have examined the constitution of many nations and statutory provisions that are prevalent in many nations. So almost everywhere, in every legal system of almost all nations, this is one of the fundamental roots of criminal jurisprudence that nobody, no accused person shall be compelled to give witness against himself. So that is the recognition which has been received by this fundamental rule of criminal jurisprudence. Now, briefly, I will not go much into the origin of this right because this is relevant for the purpose of our discussion. That's why, for a very limited purpose, I am just talking about the origin. How did this right originate? First of all, it started in England somewhere in the middle of the 17th century. Prior to the middle of the 17th century, the Star Chambers, the ecclesiastical courts, high commissions used to administer ex officio oaths to the accused. And the accused would be put to the cruel trilemma, where if he answers falsely, he will have to face sins in the heaven or in the hell, and the second aspect that he would be guilty of giving false evidence, which would be an offense of perjury. So this was a cruel dilemma which accused was supposed to face in all these old days prior to 17th century. The second was, suppose he refuses to give statement on oath, ex officio oaths, which these courts used to administer, then he would be guilty of committing contempt of court. And third was that if he speaks truth when he is asked to state in the court, then it would be against his right of self-preservation. So this cruel dilemma was causing tremendous problem, and on the basis of this obtained testimony in the court on oath, a barbaric punishment used to be imposed upon the accused. That was the real reason why John Lilburne and Sir Edward Coke objected to these high commissions, Star Chambers, and ecclesiastical courts and their ex officio oaths. Because on the basis of the extracted testimony, they would put to the trial and they would be inflicted with severe punishments. So ultimately, they objected to it by the Habeas Corpus Act 1640. The Star Chamber itself was abolished, and this right against self-incrimination was recognized in England as part of common law. By the end of the 17th century, it was firmly established in England, being part of their common law. Later on, this was adopted, some nations adopted as it is, some adapted, some recognized in a different format. But as I said in the beginning, in all over the world except China and few other nations, this right is recognized and it is part of their legal system. In China also, I have been told that recently it has been brought in a limited sense, not as broad as this right is available in England. In USA, it is Fifth Amendment. Fifth Amendment recognizes right against self-incrimination. Fifth Amendment says that no person shall, who is facing criminal trial or criminal offense, shall be compelled to be a witness against himself. This clause was interpreted, Fifth Amendment was interpreted in Miranda versus Arizona, 1966, US, volume 384, page 436. So this clause 55 of the US Constitution was interpreted, and thereby now it is known as Miranda warning. You are all aware of this Miranda warning that in USA, once the person is arrested, he has to simply plead that he is pleading Fifth Amendment, and the person who is arresting the accused, that is police officer, has to administer Miranda warning to the person concerned, stating that he has a right to silence. There it is differently worded, and it has been interpreted very widely that accused has a right to silence. So he is not supposed to speak. So that is the first warning which the police officer is supposed to administer. Second is that suppose he consciously waives his right and he decides to speak, then whatever he states before the police would be admissible in evidence. And third right is that he has a right of legal representation. He has a right of presence of his lawyer by his side when the investigation starts and when he is arrested. So these three rights are required to be informed to the accused person, and there it is complete right of silence. So this is Fifth Amendment, and this is the broad idea about why this testimonial compulsion has been interpreted, and it is incorporated in all nations. The second reason why it is incorporated in law or legal system is that if confessions and self-incrimination is extracted from a person who is arrested, then investigation officer would always try to do that, and he will not try to obtain evidence. So it would create a lethargy in the investigation, and everywhere, if this rule is not there, the police officer or the person in power will obtain extracted confession or admissions or self-incrimination, and on that basis, a person would be held guilty. Whereas on the other side, there is a natural right of self-preservation and self-liberty, preserving self-liberty. So this is why two reasons that in old days, as I said, that cruel trilemma was being faced, and because of this reason that investigation officer must collect independent evidence, and he should not simply rely on he should not be allowed to rely upon the testimonial compulsion or self-incrimination. So that is the overall situation all over the world. Now coming to Indian position. As I pointed out that it has been guaranteed under Article 20, Clause 3. The Clause 3 states like this, that no person accused of an offense shall be compelled to be a witness against himself. So I will broadly divide this clause into three parts. The first part is that no person accused of an offense, because many things turns on this phrase, that person accused of an offense. So that is first part. Second part is that shall be compelled. That is And third part is to be a witness against himself. So divided into three parts. In this webinar, my principal focus would be on the first part. Second and third part, I will simply explain in 2-3 minutes or 5 minutes at the best, at maximum. And then we will directly switch over to the first part of the subclause 3 of Article 20. As I pointed out that in Indian system, how this article is being enforced. When person is arrested, can he say that I would not like to state anything, I would to keep mum, I would like to keep my mouth shut, and nobody can compel me to speak against myself? Now, if this kind of plea is raised by an accused, whether it would be countenance in our system or not? The answer is no, because this clause, this article has been interpreted in many landmark judgments, but most importantly in Nandini Satpathi's case, AIR 1978, Supreme Court page 1025, where this interpretation was made that the accused person is bound to answer all the questions unless it incriminates himself. So long as the questions are not incriminating in nature, then he is bound to answer the question. Secondly, if we see the scheme of CRPC and Evidence Act also, this right has been given constitutional status because Dr. Ambedkar, when the Constituent Assembly debates were going on, these provisions under old CRPC and Evidence Act are since then 1872 and 1898, almost in similar words. Similar physiology has been, so they were already part of our legal system. But the constitutional makers wanted to make it beyond the reach of the ordinary legislation. So that is why it has been incorporated in the Constitution, and it is part of the fundamental right under Article 20, Clause 3. So the scheme, statutory scheme, if we look at it, then CRPC section 161, 162, 163 and 164 takes care of removing these kind of statements obtained from the from the person arrested or accused. They cannot be used at the time of trial. You are all aware of that. Statements recorded by the police officer under section 161 is not supposed to be signed by the person who is giving a statement, and under section 162 it is not permissible to be used in the trial except for a limited purpose by the accused when something is proved and he wants to contradict that witness. And with the permission of the court, the public prosecutor is also entitled to use for that limited purpose. Then 164 provides for recording of the confession. It is almost like a Miranda warning, but it would be administered by the magistrate concerned before whom the accused is produced. And it is the duty cast upon the magistrate concerned to see that the statement is not being made by the person arrested under the undue influence, duress, intimidation, or any other coercive measures with police officers. So that is one part, that there are sufficient safeguards under the Code of Criminal Procedure 1973, which says that even if the statements are recorded, they cannot be used in the trial. Then there are sufficient provision under the Indian Evidence Act also, section 24 to 27. Section 24 also provides that a person who is in authority cannot use his power, he cannot exercise duress, intimidation, coercion, undue influence in obtaining a statement whereby he gives a promise that he will have some advantage, he will gain advantage, or he will avoid certain evils. So that is 24. 25 strictly applies to confessional statement. So any statement which is confessional statement before the police, that is not allowed to be admitted in evidence. And 26 is also when person is in a police custody, if any statement is obtained, then that is also not supposed to be admitted in evidence. 27 to limited extent permits that if anything is discovered pursuant to the statement made by the accused, then that discovery aspect is permissible to be admitted, provided the statement is made voluntarily, because that this voluntary requirement is emerging from the judgment of the 9 judges bench of the Supreme Court of India, State of Bombay versus Kathi Kalu Ogad, AR 1961, Supreme Court, page 1808. So there is sufficient provision under the Criminal Procedure Code and Evidence Act which enforces the right which is a constitutional right. So as I said that there is no complete right to silence, that Nandini Satpathi's judgment is also denying that, and the recent judgment in Deepak Jagdish Chandra Patel versus State of Gujarat, which is recently reported in I think 2017, where also it has been stated that a person is bound to cooperate, he is bound to state. Only thing is that when it comes to trial, those statements will not be used as evidence. So that is, this right is protected. Now, second part, that compulsion. No, I will briefly tell about this second and third part, and then we'll focus on the first part. Second part, that no person who is accused of an offense shall be compelled to be a witness against his will. Now, compulsion in what manner? So it takes care or takes within its sweep this statutory compulsion. So no law can be made which would compel a person to make a confessional statement. It would also cover within its sweep any executive compulsion. A police officer or the authority in power also cannot compel, because the phrase is that he shall not be compelled to be a witness. Now there is no link given or idea given in the article that who can compel. So going by the natural interpretation, it would mean that there cannot be statutory compulsion, there cannot be executive compulsion by the police or the person or officer in power, and third is there cannot be judicial compulsion also. Only statement which is asked is under section 313 of the Code of Criminal Procedure, where also it is not against the interest of the accused. It is, in fact, it is in the interest of the accused, because certain evidence has emerged during the trial which leads to his guilt, and accused is given a chance to explain whether what he would like to state about the incriminatory material which has been gathered during the trial. So it is towards the part of the fulfillment of natural justice. So accused should not be suddenly surprised by certain things. So that is why 313 requires judge to put a question to the accused, but there is no oath administered and there is no adverse inference to be drawn if the question is not answered. So that is how Article 20 has been fully insulated by the statutory provision. In Nandini Satpathi's case, and there are few judgments, it has been stated by the Supreme Court that section 161 and 162 are parliamentary gloss of the constitutional provision. So that is how this is now interpreted. The third part, to be a witness against himself. Now, the controversies had been raised in the past. They had reached up to the Honorable Supreme Court, but they are now fairly settled. To be witness means to impart a knowledge in the form of a statement, oral or written statement in respect of the relevant facts. So to be witness will cover only that aspect. The giving of thumb impression, giving of palm impression, giving of blood samples, giving of specimen handwriting, all these are not covered by the phrase to be a witness against himself. That was raised, it started from MP Sharma versus Satish Chandra, reported in AIR 1954, Supreme Court, page 400. Then in Kathi Kalu Ogad, AIR 1961, page 1808, State of Bombay. 9 judges bench said that to be witness will only mean that person cannot be asked to give an oral statement which would be incriminatory in nature, which has a relevancy to the facts in trial. So it would be oral statement or statement in writing which cannot be compelled. So to be witness would only mean this, and it would not cover within its sweep giving of thumb impression, palm impression, then hair sample, blood sample, etc. The question arose in respect of narco analysis, and that controversy has been settled in Selvi's case, that it would be hit by Article 20 sub Article 3 accused cannot be compelled to undergo polygraphy test, narco-analysis test, because you would be impinging on the personal liberty and you would be extracting by artificial means the things which are only known to the accused. And he may not be willing to part with those information in the form of a statement, written or oral, and therefore no such substances which truth serum can be administered forcibly to the accused person, and if that is done, that would be hit by Article 20, Clause 3. But the accused can voluntarily subject himself to the truth serum or narco-analysis test or polygraph test. So it is permissible, but it cannot be, he cannot be compelled. So it is now settled. So far as voice sample is concerned, that was also now settled. Spectrography test in 2012, the Supreme Court said that giving a voice sample would not violate Article 20, Clause 3. It is not giving something out of your mind which you have personal, or you are simply giving your voice sample. But the two judges bench did not find any provision, legal provision, which empowers such a drawing of sample or taking of sample. Therefore, the case was referred to a 3 judges bench, and Ritesh Sinha's case recently, I think 2 years back, now it has been held that these voice samples can be obtained from the accused for determining or for the purpose of investigation trial. And since there is no express provision under the CRPC, until the appropriate legislation is made by the government, under Article 142 of the Constitution of India, we will empower the magistrate to obtain voice samples. So that is now fairly settled. So now most of the part I have briefly concentrated. Now I would like to focus on the main part. And this discussion is going to be with reference, mainly with reference to the powers of the customs officers, DRI officers, and other such officers who are exercising powers of arrest, search, seizures, and many other similar police powers under a special law. And they are empowered to prosecute by filing a complaint. So I will be mainly now onwards in this webinar focusing on this power, because rest of the things I have already spoken of. So I am not bothering you with the detailed aspect, because all these things have been fairly settled by law, and there is no need to elaborate all those things.
Pandey, so could you just slightly come closer to the mic, because for me, insofar I am concerned, it's audible to me. But some people are saying that the voice is cracking.
Okay. Now, am I audible?
The people will post it on the chat box. I will just check it out. Is it audible? Just check it out. Yes, it's perfect.
So now on the first part of the clause 3 of Article 20, that no person accused of an offense. Now, word accused of an offense has been taken out of context by Supreme Court for last 60 years. And there is a great distortion in my personal view in the law laid down by the Honorable Supreme Court for last 60 years, starting from Kathi Kalu Ogud's case, because MP Sharma and Kathi Kalu Ogud are really not concerned with the investigation or prosecution by the Customs Department. You are aware that Customs Department, and there are many other special laws, the Director of Revenue Intelligence, then Director of Enforcement under the FERA and now FEMA Act, they have power of arrest. They have power to make personal searches. They have power to make seizures. They have powers to search the premises, everything. So they are almost invested with all these powers of police officers. In MP Sharma's case, I will first start with that, because that is the beginning point. In MP Sharma's case, it was not a case of custom prosecution. It was a case of IPC offense committed by a few companies, their promoters and directors. They were ordinary offenses under the Indian Penal Code, where formal FIR was already lodged. And in that case, the question was only about the power of search and seizure. because during the investigation, large number of documents were recovered and seized from the company's premises under in exercise of power under section 96 and 97 of the old code, because this judgment is of 1954, page 300, EIR 1954, Supreme Court, page 300. So there was already a formal FIR, and the controversy whether these kind of self-incriminatory documents that are seized by the investigation officer would violate per se the guarantee under Article 20, Clause 3 or not. So that was the controversy, and the Supreme Court said that mere production of the document would not be sufficient if it is incorporating a personal statement based on personal knowledge or such details which are self-incriminatory in nature. Then to that extent it can be avoided. But otherwise, these search and seizures would be valid. But then somehow passing observations came to be made by the Supreme Court that if there is formal accusation made by against the person, then right against the testimonial compulsion will start. So it was probably in the context that search and seizure, though they may not be under arrest, but since there is a formal FIR registered, this right would be available. Though on facts it was denied by restricting it to only those statements that are self-incriminatory or inculpatory in nature. But while deciding this controversy, these kind of observations are made. Possibly the arguments might have been made that since they are not in custody and therefore Article 20, sub-Article 3 cannot be claimed. To counter this, they made a passing observations that unless and until there is a formal accusations against the person arrested, the right against testimonial compulsion under Article Clause 3 will not start at all. So this was the judgment in MP Sharma versus Satish Chandra. Then later on in the Kathi Kalu Oghad's case was also purely a criminal case, where the question was, which was posed, whether giving of blood samples, urine samples, hair samples would amount to incriminating a person who is arrested, and whether it would be hit by Article 20 Clause 3 or not. Now there also this question never directly arose in Kathi Kalu Oghad's case, which was a 9 judges bench, where also again somehow the majority view in the conclusion portion said that if somebody wants to take benefit of this article, he should stand in the character of the accused. So if he is not standing in the character of an accused, then right against this testimonial compulsion will not be available to him. Now in this case, interestingly, the minority view has clearly stated that this question is not arising at all in this case, and we should not decide this issue at all. So minority view, of course, it's a minority view, but there was a clear indication that something which had not arisen before the Supreme Court and which was not decided after detailed debate, it would not have that great precedential value. But be that as it may, that is the law today, that there should be a formal accusation. So person should stand in the character of the accused, because the wordings are that no person accused of an offense shall be compelled to be witness against himself. Now, interestingly, when it came to the prosecution by the customs officers in Ramesh Chandra Mehta versus State of West Bengal, that is reported in AIR 1970, and page number probably 852, I'm not sure. Now in this case, the Supreme Court examined the scheme of the customs law and said that the customs officers are really concerned with the assessment of the tax liability. They are not really concerned with the crime. And therefore, even if a person who is arrested and if his statement is recorded by the customs officer under section 108 of the Customs Act, it would be admissible, because he doesn't fulfill the character of being an accused of an offense. Very absurd arguments. It doesn't appeal to my common sense. The constitutional guarantee should be as broad as possible. The word person accused of an offense has been interpreted in a pedantic and narrow manner. There is no question of arresting somebody if he is not an accused. Where is the question of arresting someone who is not an accused? Even if a person who is a suspect and he is arrested, but then also in arrest memo, it is said that there is a reasonable belief that he is guilty of an offense. So stating that he is a suspect is also an accusation. So the Supreme Court took a very narrow view of this phrase, that he becomes accused under the Customs Act. The custom officers has power under section 100 of searching that person. Then 104 empowers him to arrest. Then 107 empowers him to examine. 108, that is very crucial provision, because in almost all cases where the inquiry or investigation, I would not say it as an inquiry, because once arrest is started, arrest never, no country or no legal system can countenance arrest without intention to prosecute. This is a fundamental anomaly which is prevailing in our legal system because of the Supreme Court's judgment. How can somebody be arrested for departmental adjudication? There are sufficient power to hold departmental adjudication. Section 108 empowers him to issue summons, and he is bound to answer the summons. And that is for limited purpose of adjudication. So once the person is arrested, that is my personal view, the judgments are against right now. The judgments and the law laid down by the Supreme Court is totally against the persons who are arrested under section 108 of the, 104 of the Customs Act. But I am trying to point out certain fundamental anomaly which has crept in our legal system. And because of investigation is by the custom officer, the conviction can be procured. If the investigation is by the other police officer, ordinary police officers, it is difficult to procure conviction, because there the statements of the accused or other statements are not admissible. Now, before going to the Customs Act, let me point out that I was a standing counsel for the central government for about 6 years, from 1998 to 2004. During this period, I have handled many conviction appeals representing Customs, DRI, Narcotic Control Bureau, and I have conducted conviction appeals under the Customs Act. I have conducted conviction appeals under the NDPS Act, where the investigation was by DRI or Customs officer. Unfortunately, since I was a standing counsel, I had to argue against my conscience, because I had already in my mind, I had already written an article long back that merely because these customs officers are filing complaint after inquiry, that is no ground for denying a person who is arrested his character of an accused. So against my conscience, I had argued, the convictions had been upheld. But during this 6-year period, I came to know how these statements are obtained by the customs officers, how these statements are obtained by the DRI officers, how these statements are obtained by the excise intelligence or other similar officers who are invested with officers in charge of the police station. Please mark my words that they are invested the powers of an officer of in charge of police station. If you read section 104 of the Customs Act, subsection 3, it clearly states that the officers who is arresting has a power of an officer in charge of the police station for the purposes of bail, and most important is or otherwise. bail or otherwise, and he shall be subject to all the provisions of the part 12 of the CRPC, that is section 154 to 173. So the Supreme Court in Ramesh Chandra Mehta versus State of Bengal completely drew an artificial line to deny the constitutional guarantee. This artificial line is this, that the inquiry which custom officer is conducting, it is for determining the tax liability. Now, where is the question of determining tax liability? Tax liability is entirely a different proceedings, which is adjudicating proceedings, which is conducted, and where the different powers are being exercised, that is mainly section 108. Section 108 of the Customs Act says that it is deemed to be a judicial proceeding because the custom officer is adjudicating upon, he is deciding the rights. He is deciding, he is entrusted the power of adjudication. He would be deciding the tax liability, he would be entitled to levy interest, penal interest, he would be entitled to inflict penalty, he is entitled to confiscate the goods. So the proceedings which is conducted by the customs officer, because kindly bear in mind, he performs dual role. When custom officers he arrests a person for the violation of the provisions of the Customs Act, that is mainly violation of section 135 of the Customs Act, which is punishable with 7 years imprisonment usually, and if it is not a great offense, then it would be 3 years. So person, when he is arrested, the arrest is not for adjudication purpose. Let me emphasize again, for adjudication purposes, he has to take recourse of section 108. Now what these people do, after arrest, they give summons there and then. Now if you use the language of section 108, it makes it very clear that summons has to be issued who is not in custody. It is absolutely absurd. The person who is in custody, who is arrested, who is over whom the custom officer has complete control over his mind, body, and freedom of movement. Where is the question of issuing summons under section 108? He can be simply examined under section 107, where he is not bound to speak truth. So section 108 procedure is contemplated only in respect of determining the tax liability and penalty aspect, confiscation, seizures, and all those things. And that's why it is judicial proceedings, and for that limited purpose, the statement made by the person, whether he is arrested or not, is admissible in departmental adjudication. So this artificial distinction has been drawn that custom officer is arresting for the purpose of departmental proceedings. I am not ready to believe it, and no legal system should countenance such a provision. If you remember the judgment in Joginder Kumar versus State of UP, AIM 1994, Supreme Court, page 1344, the Supreme Court in categorical terms said that mere power of arrest is not sufficient. There should have been a reason. Power of arrest is such a drastic power, is not supposed to be used ordinarily. Even if it is a small offense, it is not required to be invoked. And on the line of those observations, now there is an amendment in CRPC section 41, subsection 1 clause B clearly provides that if the offense is punishable with the imprisonment up to 7 years, he is not supposed to be arrested. So arrest definitely means intention to prosecute. It can never be for the purpose of adjudication. For the purpose of adjudication, he can be detained for a limited time. Suppose, let me give one example. Suppose a person who is coming from abroad, he lands at the airport, passes through a custom area, and while passing through, the custom officer has a suspicion that he is concealing certain goods, smuggled goods. Now he has to take decision at that stage. and he has to detain him for the time being. He cannot immediately exercise right of arrest. He cannot exercise right of arrest immediately. He has to first detain him. He has to question him. He has to make search of him, his baggage. If need be, he is taken. He is required to be X-rayed also. And during this detention, small detention period, if something is objectionable is found, which constitutes an offense, he will have to take decision whether he would be happy with the adjudication process or he really intends to prosecute. He cannot combine both the powers simultaneously. That is my argument against the present law, and which will definitely require reconsideration in the light of two judgments which I will refer to little later. So time is sufficient, I think, but I will try to be as quick as possible. So he has to take decision. So if the quantity of the smuggled goods is very high, beyond certain prescribed limits, fiscal limits for launching prosecution, then he will have to take decision that he would like to arrest or he would be happy with the adjudication process. If he is deciding that he wants to hold only departmental proceedings, then after detaining, he has to obtain address. He has to obtain basic details from him, and then he has to allow him to go back to his residence. And then after detailed inquiry, if he finds that again he is required to be summoned for further details, he has to issue a summons to him. And then in response thereto, he has to come, he has to depose, and he is bound to depose truthfully. And that kind of statement is permissible to be used for a limited purpose of adjudication, and that cannot go beyond the adjudication process, and it cannot be used in trial. Otherwise, it is quite possible that after departmental adjudication, he will be held guilty of violation, tax would be recovered, the penalty would be levied, interest would be levied, goods would be confiscated. So if the statements are admissible, then if the argument which is being made in the Supreme Court and which has been upheld, on the basis of the order of the adjudicative authority, he has to be convicted. What is the reason for holding trial? In trial, every evidence will have to be independently laid. It has to be produced. The statement which is limited for the purpose of judicial proceedings, which is recorded in section 108, cannot go into the prosecution as it is if the custom officer has exercised right of arrest. If it is for detention, he has simply detained, then I will explain it later on. First, I am on the point that when arrest takes place. So once arrest takes place, so second artificial distinction which Supreme Court has drawn is that after arrest, ultimately after inquiry, the custom officer will not lay a charge sheet before the magistrate. He will have to file a complaint. So though he is invested with all powers of in charge of police station, he has no power to lay charge sheet before the magistrate court. And he would be filing a complaint, and on that basis cognizance is taken. And that's why he is not a police officer, and the person whose statement is recorded is not an accused, and it is admissible. So that is the logic which has been upheld by the Honorable Supreme Court. So this aspect must be clearly borne in mind that the person who is arrested, there is some. Please turn off the chat box because it is creating some disturbance. So second artificial distinction is that he is filing a complaint and not a charge sheet. Now, what difference does it make? When charge sheet is filed, is the magistrate bound to accept the charge sheet? No. There are series of judgments that the charge sheet or a closure report, which a police officer puts before the magistrate under section 173, is a conclusion drawn by that person, that police officer. Magistrate is not bound by that conclusion report. He can differ from the report, whether it is a closure report or a charge sheet. So mere power to file charge sheet and mere filing of complaint, ultimately cognizance has to be taken under section 190 by the magistrate, whether it be on the basis of charge sheet or be it on the basis of complaint. What turns on it? Is it an essential attribute of a police power? Ultimately, the position is same. Even if it is charge sheet is filed, magistrate is bound to refuse to accept it and say that, okay, I'm not happy with the investigation. I don't find any material which accuse a person with the commission of offense, or there is no material available and I am not accepting it. I am directing you to make further investigation, place a fresh supplementary report. So filing of charge sheet cannot be determinative or a criterion to decide whether a person is accused of an offense or not, and whether a person or officer, custom officer who is holding inquiry is not a police officer. So both these criterion that are adopted by the Honorable Supreme Court of India has created great anomaly in the legal system, which requires to be corrected by interpreting Article 20, Sub-Article 3 in the widest possible manner, because there are judgments, MP Sharma, Katikalu Oghad, Nandini Satpathy, all these judgments say that constitutional protection should be as broad as possible. It cannot be interpreted in narrow and pedantic manner. It has been, in the words of Justice Krishna Iyer, if may I quote, it has been said that it would be eroding the substance of Article 20 and paying a hollow homages to the holy verbalism. Very beautifully stated that if you forget the substance of Article 20, Clause 3, and you determine everything on the formalities, technicalities, that he is not an accused formally, and that person is not a police officer, though all police powers are entrusted to him, we will not treat him as a police officer. So it would be sapping the juice and retaining the ring. So I may again quote that it would be eroding the substance, in the words of Justice Krishna Iyer, it would be eroding the substance of Article 20, Clause 3 and paying a hollow homage to the holy verbalism. These are the words in Nandini Satpathy's case. So we are still on artificiality. Now coming to the two judgments on the basis of which the law requires relook. Now before that, I must point out that in one case where I appeared on behalf of the Customs Department, the passenger landed at Ahmedabad airport concealing gold biscuits, 88 gold biscuits in sandal, weighing 10 kilograms. So during search, it was found that he is hiding this gold in old days. It was valued at 51 lakhs in 1996. The person was arrested there and then. He was produced before the magistrate. He was not given bail. His bail application stood rejected up to the Supreme Court of India. Unfortunately, his conviction was solely based on the testimony recorded under Section 108. You follow what I am trying to point out, that what a drastic power it is. 108, if it is allowed to be used in criminal trial, it would virtually erode the substance of Article 20. So this was one case where offense under the Customs Act, which was tried, and person was convicted simply on the basis of the statement recorded by the custom officer under 108 of the Customs Act. Now, as I said, where is the question of recording under 108 when person is in your custody? Because it requires issuance of a summons. Summons for giving a statement, summons for production of document. If a person is in your custody, can you circumvent the provisions of Article 20 sub-Article 3 by handing over summons at there and then recording a statement and stating that now it is admissible, it will be used for departmental proceedings and we will use it in criminal proceedings and conviction will be made on that basis. Unfortunately, there are judgments to the effect that go to say that conviction can be solely based on the statements recorded of the person arrested under the Customs Act. So this is one instance there. I have at NDPS cases also where DRI had conducted investigation or inquiry, as they say, and in one case, Customs Department had conducted inquiry. There again, it was merely because of the statements recorded under Section 108. Now, when they exercise power under NDPS Act, they simply write that it is read with Section 67 of the NDPS Act, Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances. Now, Section 67 does not say that person is bound to speak truth. It is not a judicial proceeding in that sense. Despite that, up to, I think, 2008, I think large number of convictions have been made under the Narcotic Drugs Act also, merely because the inquiry or investigation was conducted by Excise Intelligence, Director of Revenue Intelligence, or a Customs officer. If the NDPS investigation had it been done by the police officer, there was no possibility. So merely because name is changed, when the powers are similar, merely the garb is changed, that would not be sufficient to use the statement which is recorded. But fortunately, I think Justice S.B. Sinha and Justice Sirpurkar in Noor Agha versus State of Punjab carved out a different path, at least in the NDPS case. And my argument is that the view which has been accepted with regard to the prosecution under the NDPS Act, which is done by the Customs officer and DRI officers, should be extended to the prosecution under the Customs Act also. Only it can be used for limited purpose of adjudication proceedings. That's a different thing. I am not commenting on that admissibility aspect. There it has been stated by the Honorable Supreme Court Justice S.B. Sinha and Justice Sirpurkar in Noor Agha versus State of Punjab. It is reported in AIR 2009 supplementary Supreme Court cases, Supreme Court, AIR. There, Justice Sinha has clearly stated that merely change of the name is not enough. You will have to see the substance of the power which he is exercising. So he said that garb is not important. Under Section 53 of the NDPS Act also, the customs officer or other empowered officers have been invested with the powers of officer in charge of police station. And therefore, once they are invested with the powers of officer in charge of police station, then merely because he has obtained statement under Section 108, as such, it has been stated that once he is holding inquiry under NDPS Act, there is no question of going into Customs Act unless it is at the stage when person is landing or something is brought within the custom area from a foreign national or Indian national coming from abroad. Then customs will come. But when it is ordinary investigation under for the NDPS Act, then he is exercising power of police officer, and therefore conviction cannot be recorded only on the basis of the statement recorded before the customs or DRI officer. So that's a very great judgment in my personal view. And for the first time, a different path is carved out and possibly it has been now followed also. So at least in NDPS case, even if the investigation is done by DRI or customs officer, mere confessional statement or inculpatory statement or incriminatory statement cannot form basis for sole basis for convicting a person. So that is one judgment. Now another judgment is Department of Enforcement versus Deepak Mahajan. It is reported in year 1994 Supreme Court, page 1775. Now all this throughout up to 1994, there is consistent arguments of the Customs Department, DRI, and all those persons defending prosecution that we are arresting, when we arrest and we give supply memo or arrest memo, we are not accusing him. And therefore, he doesn't stand in the character of an accused. And therefore, he will not have a right under Article 20, Clause 3. Now, somebody who is ingenious, he found out that if this is the argument, let us argue counter. So, under the Customs Act, Section 104 permits that he can be arrested, and then there is a duty cast him before the magistrate concerned in 24 hours, because that's a constitutional obligation flowing from Article 22, and no arrest can be without completing formality with that Article 22. And then DK Basu's case, remaining formalities were now also being obeyed by the officers of the customs and DRI who are arresting them. So in this case, somebody said that, okay, you are arresting, then you have no right to hold us in judicial custody, or you have no right to demand police custody, means or custodial interrogation under 167, because Section 167 of CRPC uses the word that person accused of an offense or accused person. So 167 says that if somebody is to be sent to judicial custody or police custody, he needs to be a person accused of an offense or accused person. So Supreme Court examined all these aspects. He has, in that judgment, a comparative table has been given. What are the powers of the officers of Department of Enforcement under the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act, and powers of the customs officer under the Customs Act. So it gives detailed table, and if you examine each power, they are clear attributes of the police power. So Supreme Court said in this case that accused means person who is arrested, whose liberty has been taken away. So the word accused in 167 has to be construed. Person who is arrested is to be assimilated with the person accused of an offense. So merely because you are saying that there is no formal accusation, that would not take out from the purview of the person accused of an offense. So Supreme Court said that yes, once his liberty has been taken away.
I suppose you will just stop the video.
In a moment. Okay.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. I'm sorry. So in this judgment, I was referring to Deepak Mahajan's case. Supreme Court said that it is almost, person arrested is almost equal to accused, and he can be sent to police custody or judicial custody under the under provisions of Section 167 of CRPC. Now for 167, he is an accused, and for Article 20 sub Article 3, he is not an accused. What a travesty of justice. Does it appeal to your common sense? For ordinary legislation, for sending him, he is an accused. And when question comes to extending a guarantee of constitutional right, you say that he is not accused. He becomes accused when you file a complaint. Then what is he is in the state of flux. He is neither accused, he is nothing. What is the status? Somebody who is intelligent, he might say that he is a suspect. But then suspect is also, you are saying that he is suspect. We have credible information, we have sufficient evidence, and he is in all probability is guilty of an offense. So label him as a suspect is also an accusation, and he is an accused. So on the basis of these two judgments, my personal view is that this entire law requires reconsideration, and the constitutional protection needs to be extended once the custom officer decides to arrest. If he doesn't decide and he simply holds departmental proceedings where a person is bound to speak truth, and then departmental proceedings are done, okay. Thereafter, suppose custom officer decides that now I would like to launch prosecution. That's another problem which will have to be answered. Then the best solution would be, in such a situation, as such, we will have to exclude the statement of the accused, which was recorded for that limited purpose of adjudication in the trial. And remaining things can go into the evidence. And second thing, possible way is to seek complete corroboration. So if the conviction is possible independently and just as a last resort, such a statement which is recorded during the adjudication proceedings for the limited purpose of deciding tax liability, if it is to be used for the criminal trial without arrest, I am on the aspect where department has not arrested and he simply after adjudication process decides to launch prosecution. In such a case, these two things occurs to my mind, that these are the two possible ways where this constitutional guarantee can be enforced, because ultimately he is going to be prosecuted and the prosecution would be based on his self-testimony, self-incriminatory statement. So in such a case, first view is that it should be excluded and rest of the things which has been collected can go into evidence and it can be its admissibility and other things can be examined and statement of the accused can be taken away, or worst come worst, if it is to be used in the criminal trial, then the magistrate concerned should independently try to weigh the evidence. And finally, after weighing evidence, just to lend credence to his conclusion, he can use as a corroboration this kind of statement which is recorded for limited purpose of adjudication. So my conclusions are that the Supreme Court needs to relook into this controversy in view of Noor Aga's case and Deepak Mahajan's case. Second is, custom officer is exercising almost all powers of police officer, and the most important attribute of police power is power to arrest, which is their power of arrest, power to release him on bail, power to produce before the magistrate, and power to seek police remand. So these are the basic attributes of police power, not filing of charge sheet. Because magistrate can take cognizance on the basis of private complaint, he can take cognizance on the basis of charge sheet, he can take cognizance on the basis of other information also. So second conclusion is that he is a police power. Third conclusion is this, that this judicial proceeding, section 108 proceedings are considered to be judicial proceeding, is to be construed for limited purpose of adjudication, and it has no direct connection with the criminal prosecution. And lastly, this Noor Aga analogy needs to be extended to all the customs of offenses under the Customs Act. Now, only in 2 minutes, I will just give how this absurd test has been evolved, because Supreme Court is posing a wrong question all throughout 60 years. If you pose a wrong question, it inevitably leads to a wrong answer. So if the wrong question has been posed, now I will give 2 illustrations and then I will conclude immediately, and then we will open the question answer session. Now you are all aware of that in view of the Lalita Kumari's judgment, a limited preliminary inquiry is also permissible. You follow? Now, as such, it is my personal view that limited inquiry does not empower the police officer to record statements. It should be a discrete inquiry to find out whether the information given is of cognizable offense and there is substance or not. But suppose the police officer exceeds his jurisdiction, he calls the person, and that is a usual phenomenon. If you happen to go to police station, there are now police officers are receiving complaints, and on the basis of they call persons, they record their statements. And now suppose those statements are put up for evidence in trial. At that stage, he is not an accused. He is not formally labeled as accused. He doesn't stand in the character of accused. You see what kind of disastrous consequences would ensue if such a thing is permitted in our law. So by exceeding, he records the statement, and then he comes that now this statement should be used, because he is not a formal accused at the relevant time when his statement was obtained, though it is inculpatory, confessional, whatever may be the nature of, but it should be used. Now, would court say that we will accept it? This is turning a blind eye to the reality. I know how this customs officer, DRI officers do investigation. And if you, many of you are representing this department, and you are also aware of you are aware of how these investigations are conducted by these officers. So these things are known to it. Only the Supreme Court and the courts are turning a blind eye to this hard reality and recording convictions on the basis of the sole testimony recorded under section 108. So when this preliminary inquiry aspect will give idea that how this argument is absolutely without any substance, that he should be formally accused. And formally accused is also taken out of MP Sharma's case, which was not concerning the custom investigation. Second illustration is, suppose FIR is given against unknown persons. There are many cases where accused are unknown. So there is no formal allegations against any person. Now, during the investigation, some material is gathered by the investigation officers, and he arrests that person. There would not be immediately change in the FIR because FIR is already written. There is no formal allegation or accusation in the FIR against that particular person. He would be arrested, and in arrest memo, the officer would simply say that this is the material on the basis of which we have arrested and we have a strong suspicion. He is not labeling accusations in the sense which Supreme Court has interpreted. And suppose these statements which are recorded of that person who is arrested, can the prosecutor say that there is no formal accusation in the FIR? Where is he named? There are no formal accusations, and therefore we will use it. So can you countenance such a system in our country? More particularly, this right has been granted. So with these two illustrations, I just, these are my personal views. As at the beginning I said, my views are based on my study and research, and I am sure that this would definitely appeal to your common sense. What is being done by the Supreme Court is uncommon. They are laying down the artificial test to deny the, in the zest holding convictions. This is being done. So now let us have a question answer session, and I conclude this session. I am thankful to Beyond Law CLC entire team, Mr. Vikas and Punjab Law University, and all of you who have heard
just
me very patiently with great attention. And this debate would definitely lead to laying down a correct law by the Supreme Court of India. Thank you very much. Question answer.
Before taking question answers, so Joy has also been into all these fields. I will ask, because he's also dealing all such issues. We would also like to have his views also. So Joy, something at your background is going on, just mute it, and then we would like to have your perspective.
Yeah. Asim Bhai has definitely given a very illuminating talk today, and he has touched on the various judgments which are landmark judgments. And to add to what Asim Bhai said, Asim Bhai, you are absolutely right. It is judicially now noticed that there is a beating in the DRI offices. Clients are kept overnight. Statements are extorted forcibly. Unfortunately, these statements are admissible in evidence not only qua that person, but even against others, like Naresh Supani case, you know.
Yes.
The difficulty, Asim Bhai, is this, and this is very important issue that you have raised, and I'm so excited about it.
Thank you.
And all the people who are also there on this chat, for them also, that 154 envisages FIR.
Yes.
Customs, when they start an investigation, they don't lodge an FIR. So they are acting as a police officer.
Police officer. Arrest memo is done, Kali.
Absolutely right, sir. You are absolutely right. Now, that is the difficulty. And therefore, there is a whole litigation now pending before Supreme Court, where the issue, the focal point of issue is, unfortunately, CGI said there is no urgency, but but the focal issue is this, that if he is acting as a police officer, for example, Sahib, you gave an instance of that gold smuggling case.
Yes.
Every day they are granting spot bail at airport.
Yes.
Because now under 135 there are two categories of offences.
Yes.
One is bailable, one is non-bailable.
Right.
So they are granting spot bail. They are also carrying out all the other acts which police officers carry out. Yet they don't follow 154 CRPC.
Yes.
Therefore, what happens is that now you have to approach High Court, take an order that advocate at visible distance, not audible distance.
Yes.
Because you want to protect the constitutional guarantee of 20 into bracket 3 to your client. You don't want him to be forced into making self-incriminatory statements.
Right.
But every client can't do that, no, Sahib.
Yes.
Everybody doesn't have the wherewithal to engage counsel and do that. So, sir, what you have raised today is very, very critical. And I'm sure that Vikas, I think what Asim Bhai has started is, I think, on a nationwide basis. This is a very, very critical thing, because the way there is abuse of powers by the custom officers, and now GST and now PMLA, you are seeing, that needs to be highlighted. And unfortunately, our judges are looking the other way and turning a blind eye towards it. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Why I had chipped in Sujoy was that I knew that he's also one of the specialization is core into this thing. So I will also keep him unmuted once the questions are coming, because I know that Sujoy Kantawala has his own insights. Though you are the key speaker, but once you have a person like Sujoy, we can always ask him. They always say 2 heads are better than 1.
Yeah.
Especially and once you are having good brains of the nation who can actually give new
And
insights.
Vikas, let me tell you one thing, we both are Gujaratis also.
Right.
Though, for that, Sujoy, I will cut you short, because at the first instance, I told that this virtual platform has shown that we shouldn't be restricted to the state and this thing.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I was just joking.
So I understand that, but still I was saying, I will share with you one of the things we had called some of the guests to speak upon it. He said, I am more happy because you are from Punjab and you are calling me from the other state. It shows that you are not restricted to the region-wise dissemination of knowledge. I said knowledge has no barriers. It has to go with the whip of the air. We will
I
take
agree.
the question. So Joy, just check the background, because once we are keeping you unmuted.
Yeah.
Just check it out. Can the questions be reposted, because majority of the comments are on they've appreciated the webinar. I'm reading the questions.
Somebody has posted that with regard to Article 19, freedom of
Yes,
speech.
I can read that question. Aditya Agarwal says, can you please discuss the right to remain silent with respect to Article 19 subclause A, considering that right to remain silent is also right derived, stand corrected, from right to freedom of speech and expression. What is your take on that?
Yes, actually, I understand that Article 19 guarantees freedom of speech, which includes freedom not to speak also. But they are always subject to the reasonable restrictions and law made by the parliament. Now, law has been made by the parliament, that is CRPC, where 161 in Nandini Satpathi's case, it has been stated that accused can also be asked statements. So it is a parliamentary gloss of the constitutional guarantee. And therefore, though there is a right not to speak, it is subject to the law and reasonable restriction. And the procedure should be fair, just, and reasonable under Article 21. So this article, this section 161, 162, and the interpretation of the Supreme Court of India is in consonance with Article 19 and 21. So that answers the query.
Himanshu Kanda, can police go for a narco test without the presence of the lawyer to whom narco test is held? Is there any punishment of the police officer on doing such thing?
This Selvi judgment has clarified all the aspects, Srimati Selvi, where it has been held that it is hit by Article 20 Clause 3, and it is only if the accused person wants to voluntarily undergo that test, then in that event he can be ordered. Otherwise, it is not possible to be ordered.
Mahima Sharma. As we know, usually lay persons are not well aware of their constitutional right. So if a suspect who is illiterate and silent in a pre-trial can be presumed as guilty of the offense or not? What is your take?
I did not get it. Please reread it.
Sir, as we know, usually lay persons are not well aware of the constitutional rights. So if a suspect who is illiterate and silent in the pre-trial, can it be presumed that he is guilty of the offense?
No, actually, as I said that there is no complete right of silence in absolute terms. It is a restricted right. Therefore, I state that in some nations it is complete right to silence, like America. There are many other countries where there is a complete right to silence. Our system has not incorporated right to silence as a specific right. It is right against testimonial compulsions or self-incrimination. But if somebody doesn't do anything, no adverse inference can be drawn. Only thing is possibly he might be denied bail on the ground that he is not cooperating with the investigation. So at the bail stage, he will have to face difficulty. But I don't see any difficulty at the time of trial on the basis of non-speaking anything. No adverse inference can be
drawn. A person is arrested on the basis of source of information when no FIR had been registered. Can he be termed as a person accused of offense at that time? Whether the confession obtained at that time would be admissible or not?
Yes, that is what I gave a hypothetical example of Lalita Kumar is now preliminary inquiry without registering FIR. Also, a statement is possible to be obtained, and there are cases because FIR is not a condition precedent to the investigation. If you read Emperor versus Khwaja Nazir Ahmad, AIR 1945, Privy Council, page 18, it has clearly said that filing of FIR is not a condition precedent for starting investigation. Section 157 itself provides that he can proceed for investigation irrespective of information also. So even without registering FIR, suppose he approaches and he starts investigating and then later on he records the FIR, I don't think that the court would deny the constitutional guarantee of those lines which is applied to in customs offences. This position is almost identical, but still the judges would say that here is an ordinary offense and police is there, therefore we will not allow the statement to be admitted. So that
Abhishek Sanghi, how do we reconcile section 50 subclause 3 of PMLA with the right to not self-incriminate? Is section 50 subclause 3 of PMLA unconstitutional? Anybody questioned under section 50 subclause 3 is also an accused in a scheduled offense and the statement made could incriminate him. What is your take?
Let me be candid enough. Today, for today's discussion, I have not examined this provision. I will have to examine this provision specifically and compare it with the provisions of the Customs Act. Now, there are statutes where are draconian statutes, their reverse burdens are cast upon the accused. And there are many other techniques adopted by the parliamentary to obviate these fundamental rights. So I am not sure, so I will not answer anything on this because frankly, I have not examined it.
It's understandable because once we ask questions on the chat box, anything under the...
No, I understand. If possible, I will answer, but if...
I can just ask if Sujoy can do, because Sujoy also specializes in the PMLA.
No, I agree with Asim Bhai. I agree with Asim Bhai that reverse burden is there in many statutes. It is ingrained. Section 24 of PMLA, in fact, specifically talks about the reverse burden of proof, where you are presumed to be guilty. It is, that's the law. Because Section 3 and Section 4 of the PMLA Act is such a wide and inclusive definition that any person who innocently comes also into possession of sale proceeds of crime and portrays them as untainted. But therefore, whether there is intent or there is no intent, again will be tested at trial. What about bail? I have clients over here who are languishing in custody and not after Corona since August 2019.
So it would not be proper for me to answer this because
No, sir, it's perfect. It's better to be as it is the right to silence. Silence also includes. We shouldn't take
I would
somebody on a
exercise right to
platform
silence. I would
on a wrong tangent.
Absolutely.
One wrong message just spoils the entire scenario. J. Selvan, under NDPS Act, search and seizure proceeds. Later on, FIR is registered. Confession was obtained when there was no FIR. What is your take on that?
Noor simply answer everything. Noor judgment, Noor versus State of Punjab, Justice Sinha has clarified. If it is by the customs officer or a DRI officers, then they would be not admissible, and police officers otherwise it is not admissible.
Dipti Chaudhary, in case of a trial, if the petitioner denies on any evidence presented by the respondent, will be considered as a right to silence or not at the right of cross-examination. Dipti, you would have to reframe the question slightly. Meanwhile, we take the question of Amdamas Bansode. Can you please elaborate the concept ignorance of law is no excuse?
I think recently Punjab High Court has said that ignorance of law is not an excuse for judges also. I think it's some sort of such observation.
That judgment was by Justice Rana. It said that the lawyers have to show the right judgment, right assistance in the right perspective.
All right. So I came across such judgment. So ignorance of law is never an excuse from the beginning.
And what is the effective remedy against the arbitrary arrest by violation of norms of Section 41 of CRPC? 41A.
Habeas corpus, you can file habeas corpus. You can challenge the procedure of arrest. And now, in view of there is inbuilt mechanism recording the reasons. Ordinary offenses, police officer has to record reasons for arrest, and if he doesn't propose to arrest, he has to record reasons, and that is sufficient safeguard. And by suppose if with mala-fide intention a person is arrested, before remand is granted, he will have to approach, because once remand is granted, High Court will say that we will not exercise habeas corpus because now judicial mind has been
Absolutely right.
and he has been sent to judicial custody. So we will not examine in habeas corpus. So we will have to take 482 or something of that sort, CRPC.
Right, sir. We won't take any questions because invariably we try to touch the base by 6:30 and wrap it off. But since there were certain questions on PMLA, fortuitously enough, we have yet another session because we all thought that PMLA is an act which is growing with a flux of time, and people are quite interested. And the nod from Mr. Asim as well as Mr. Sujoy, plus the questions shows that PMLA is a good subject. So tomorrow, taking into the sentiments, as they say, though these sessions are not based upon TRP, but going upon the sentiments of this participants, we have another webinar tomorrow on anti-money laundering law in India as contained in the PMLA Act 2002. And we have very good speakers just like we had today, Mr. Seem Pandya. Tomorrow, Mr. C.A. Suresh Prabhu, the Member of Parliament and former Minister of Commerce, Industry, Civil Aviation, Railway Minister would be there. Then Justice Manmohan Singh, former Judge, Delhi High Court, former Chairman PMLA, Chairman of the Intellectual Property Board, along with Mr. Advocate Ashwini Taneja, Chartered Accountant, former member Income Tax Appellate Tribunal. He would also be there. So all those issues which were just boiling down, today Mr. Pandya and Mr. Sujoy Kantawala just gave you that, as we say, before the sun rises, we just get the slight glimpse of the sunshine which is coming forth. Tomorrow we have a full session on this thing. Sujoy, you're not able to hear it?
No, I can hear. I just wanted to wish Asim Bhai and everyone from Gujarat that hope the cyclone doesn't
That's true. Sujoy, we are just muting you. the factum of cyclone has just sometimes hit also on the platform. So we all have to be controlled in some way or the other. These all things. So Joy, we are just unmuting you. We can't keep you silent. Right of silence doesn't mean that we have to keep you silent. We have to hear you, and your words while you speak. They are pearls of wisdom, and they are just music to the ears of knowledge.
No,
Yes,
I wanted to once again thank Asim bhai, and I wanted to wish all our brothers from sisters from Gujarat on this program and Maharashtra, because that cyclone is likely to. Only thing, just wanted to leave you with a little bit of humor. The right of silence, we can only argue in court, not in the house.
I was just reading a chat box. They said, why not have a session with Sujoy Kantawala? Sujoy, just tell the people that you are also coming on a webinar. Just tell the insight of that.
Yes, my friends, on the 5th Friday at 5 p.m., we are doing a very, very interesting web chat actually on live-in relationships. And because these days you find a lot of litigation where live-in relationships started with a rosy picture, but as my surname says Kantawala, usme kaante aa gaye. And then unfortunately 375 is always invoked vis-a-vis the man. And sometimes it has disastrous consequences. So we are going to have a chat on that. Asim bhai, if you have time, please join in. We are trying to discover the fine nuances. Mr. Tanveer Mir, Ahmed Mir from Delhi is joining, and one gentleman, Raj Kaushal, from the media industry is also joining. And Vikas
Send
will
me the
be.
link. I will definitely join.
Yes, sir. It will be a pleasure.
Asim bhai, we will send you the link, because though we will be talking on that day on living relationship, but it is now a leaving relationship as on today. Tomorrow we will again catch up again on this platform. Time is 6 p.m. Those who want to have the link, they can send we have sent on the WhatsApp 98725. We have sent on the chat box 03300. Or you can also follow us on our Beyond Law CLC page of Instagram or Facebook to have further updates on the webinars. We are all interested. We are having webinars on different perspectives. Like Sujoy will be coming. We have another session on PMLA. Then we have session by Mr. Puneet Bali, Senior Counsel, along with Yuvraj Singh. And since we are Beyond Law CLC, Puneet Bali would be giving insights on the sports law, and Mr. Yuvraj Singh would give something beyond law. So they just catch up. Yuvraj Singh in its own way on his own platform, on our platform.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Stay home, stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Asim ji. It was a wonderful session. It was the right way to connect. And Sujoy just has pitched in that right to silence at home. Sometimes it's very, very difficult. For that, you have to catch hold of Mr. Pandya, but I do not know whether he will be able to give a right cue for that. Or it could be that he will be engaging Kantawala how to come.
No husband can do that.
And from all three of us, thank you all the participants who have joined us from Pan India and also on the Facebook. Because we can't forget, the Facebook people are much larger in participation, and they gave the right flip to our organization. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, stay home.